Hey guys, I am back with another reading from Frindle. We have read chapters 1 and 2, so we met the main character Nick, and we learned about his upcoming 5th grade year and the teacher that he's most worried about, Miss Granger, because she is known for being pretty tough and loving words and vocabulary, and they have to have an extra special dictionary. So we're going to now jump into chapter 3, which is the question. The first day of school was always get acquainted day. Books were passed out, there was lots of chatter, everyone asked, what did you do over the summer? Periods 1 through 6 went very smoothly for Nick, but then came period 7. Mrs. Granger's class was all business. The first thing they did was take a vocabulary pretest to see how many of the 35 words for the week the kids already knew. Tremble, circular, orchestra, the list went on and on. Nick knew most of them. Then there was a handout about class procedures. After that, there was a review paper about cursive writing, and then there was a sample sheet showing how the heading should look on every assignment. No let-up for 37 minutes straight. Nick was an expert at asking the delaying question, also known as the teacher stopper, or the guaranteed time waster. At 3 minutes before the bell, in that split second between the end of the day of today's class, between the end of today's class work and the announcement of tomorrow's homework, Nick could launch a question guaranteed to sidetrack the teacher long enough to delay or even wipe out the homework assignment. Timing was important, but the right question, that was the hard part. Questions about stuff in the news, questions about college the teacher went to, questions about the teacher's favorite book or hobby or sport. Nick knew all the tricks. He had been very successful in the past. Here he was in 5th grade near the end of the first language arts class. Mrs. Granger and Nick could feel a homework assignment coming the way a farmer could feel a rainstorm. Mrs. Granger paused to catch her breath, and Nick's hand shot up. He glanced down at her seating chart, then up at him. Her sharp gray eyes were not even turned up to half power. Yes, Nicholas, Mrs. Granger, you have so many dictionaries in the room, and that huge one especially. Where did all those words come from? Did they just get copied from other dictionaries? It sure is a big book. It was a perfect thought grenade. Kapow! Several kids smiled, and a few peeked at the clock. Nick was famous for this, and the whole class knew what he was doing. Unfortunately, so did Mrs. Granger. She hesitated a moment and gave Nick a smile that was just a little too sweet to be real. Her eyes were the color of a thundercloud. Why, what an interesting question, Nicholas. I could talk about it for hours, I bet. She glanced around the classroom. Do the rest of you want to know too? Everyone nodded yes. Very well then, Nicholas. Will you do some research on that subject and give a little oral report tomorrow to the class? If you find the answer yourself, it will mean so much more than if I just told you. Please have your report ready for our next class. Mrs. Granger smiled at him very sweetly. Then it was back to business. Now, the homework for tomorrow can be found on page 12 in your Words Alive book. Nick barely heard the assignment. His heart was pounding, and he felt small, very small. His heart, he could feel the tops of his ears glowing red. A complete shutdown, an extra assignment, and probably a little black mark next to his name on the seating chart. Everything he had heard about this teacher was true. Don't mess around with the lone Granger. So, our question for this chapter is, what question does Nick ask Miss Granger on the first day of class to stall the lesson? How does she, so how does Miss Granger outsmart Nick? So thinking back on that chapter, what was the question that Nick asked Miss Granger, trying to pause her thinking for enough time so they didn't have homework? What was his question to her, and how did she respond to outsmart Nick? So I want you to think about that. Tell someone in your house if you can answer that question. If you can't, re-listen to this chapter and see if you can find it that you're specifically listening for it. All right, guys, I hope you liked that chapter and come back again for chapter 4.